Good evening. It is really good to see you again. And thank you. And today we are going to continue the Mystery of Antisemitism. And today it is going to be connected a bit with the poem, but we are going to try to understand the story of Amalek. Now, Amalek is actually the most terrible enemy that the Jewish people actually had for since the beginning of time. And that's right. And actually, if we trace the incidents that Amalek actually attacked the Jewish people, we're going to find something extraordinary. And we're going to try and understand if it is a pattern, if it is a constancy regarding Amalek. And this is something really extraordinary that I hope that we will learn it together. So, could anyone tell me the three incidents during the history of that Amalek actually attacked the Jewish people? Does anyone know? Yes?
The first one was when they snuck attack us out of Egypt.
That's right. When we went out of Egypt, okay? And the second time?
Is that the one with Shaul, when Shaul attacked Amalek? Or are you thinking of another one?
Okay, that is a good answer, but I am talking about when
we were coming out of Egypt.
When Amalek actually attacked the Jewish people. There are some more papers over here, whoever needs.
Is Haman?
Right, at the story of the Purim. So, the third encounter we are going to see momentarily, but first let's...
Yes? Was the third one Hitler?
Right. That is right. So let's now explore the three different encounters. There are some more papers here, whoever needs. So you could see in A, the first encounter, the exodus from Egypt. You could see in source number 1, the nation of Israel goes out of Egypt, and then when the nation of Israel gets to a place called Rephidim, so we were attacked by Amalek, okay? And that is why we read on the Shabbat, previous to Purim, it is called a Shabbat Zachor, because we have to remember what Amalek did to us. It says, Zachor et asher עשה לך Amalek בדרך בצאתכם ממצרים, אשר קרך בדרך ויזנב בך כל הנחשלים אחריך, ואתה עייף ויגיע ולא ירא אלוקים. So, what Amalek did, he saw that the nation of Israel was going out of Egypt and attacked the weak, the innocent, the children, the women. And then, because of that, so we have to remember what Amalek did. And unfortunately, it was not the only encounter. But afterwards, if you look at B, the second encounter, it is actually, I called it the Exodus from Babylon. So the nation of Israel was in exile after the destruction of the first temple. And then Haman, who was the descendant of Amalek, he actually raises to power in the Persian Empire, and he tries to destroy the nation of Israel. As it says, ויבז ביניו לשלוח יד במרדכי לבדו, כי הגידו לו את עם מרדכי, ויבקש המן להשמיד את כל היהודים אשר בכל מלכות אחשוורוש, Mordechai. So this was actually one of the most terrible moments of the Jewish people, because that King Ahasuerus actually ruled the Persian Empire from India until Ethiopia, the whole known world at that time. And actually Haman, who, as I said, was the most powerful person at the empire, he decided to destroy, in a very systematic way, all of the Jews. So if he would have succeeded, so the Jewish people, chas v'chalila, it actually would have been a complete threat for our existence. So this actually was the second time. Now, in the source number 3, so how do we know that Haman was a descendant of the same Amalek that what? That's right. It says in the source number 3, אחר הדברים האלה גידל המלך אחשוורוש את המן בן המדתה האגגי. Okay? So in the Targum, it is a commentary and also an ancient translation of a Megillat Esther. So there is the whole family tree from Agag to Haman. So one can actually trace it and see that he was a descendant of Amalek. Okay, so now, after we passed the first encounter, Exodus, and then Babylonia, then after 2,500 years, it is the third encounter, and that was previous to our generation, the Exodus from Europe, I called it. So most of the people of Israel were in exile after the destruction of the second temple, and then for 2,000 years the nation of Israel has been in the diaspora and had mostly a terrible time, because our enemies didn't stop attacking us. But the Holocaust was something completely different than anything that we experienced during the 2,000 years in exile. So the Nazis, they attacked the Jewish people, and they destroyed 6 million Jews during the Holocaust. And the question is there a connection between Amalek and the Nazis? So obviously there isn't any, one cannot trace a
lineage.
That's right, a blood, a connection. However, Rabbi Soloveitchik, as you could see in the source number 5, so he said that they were ideological heirs of Amalek. That they actually continued the ideology of Amalek. And he says, but in the name of his father, Rabbi Moshe Soloveitchik of Brisk, and he says that Amalek isn't necessarily a specific people. It is an ideology that attacks the Jewish people. And then now we have to ask two very important questions. The first question is, what is the ideology of Amalek? And the second question is, why does Amalek attack the Jewish people? And if you would permit me to add a third question, why specifically at these 3 times? It is not accidental. What?
They were the most opportune. In the desert when we left, they came from behind and they attacked the women and children like a predator attacks a herd of gazelle, right? It goes for the weakest one, not the strongest. Most opportune. They do this because they want to disgrace Hashem, and they want to, I'm not entirely sure why the first time, but after the first time, they have a vendetta against us. They have to keep going. They have to. So anytime they get the opportunity, they take it. Haman was given an amazing opportunity, and Mordechai even gave him an excuse to do it. Same thing there.
So that's an interesting explanation. I thank you, Shua. Any more explanations? Are you trying to understand the ideology of Amalek? Why to attack the Jewish people, and why specifically at these times? Yes.
Our nation is probably the only nation that has an obligation to go out and destroy them. So there's probably they've already gone too far. At this point, there's no turning back for them. It's only one nation under God's roof at this point.
So that's interesting. Thank you.
It's more like they've committed the crime so much that if they stop now, they're pretty much admitting, guilt, death, whatever you want.
More explanations?
I've also heard,
Yes?
may have been in this class, I don't remember where, that Amalek believes themselves to be the real Jewish people, not the chosen ones. That they're the descendants of Esav. Esav is the descendant of Abraham, and they believe that they're supposed to be the nation of God, and that it's a jealousy aspect, or not even a jealousy aspect, a reclaiming of what's theirs aspect.
That's interesting. Thanks for that insight.
Seems like there's 3 shlavim that are connected to Geula. And it's like right before major events, Har Sinai, receiving the Torah, and the second, going back to the land of Israel to rebuild, and then in the third, it's coming back to the nation. It seems like right before there's a huge leap in the progression of the nation. There's always this, they come out to...
Beautiful. What is your name?
David Perlo.
3 Davids all on the same side of the table.
David, thank you very much for this beautiful insight. This insight is actually one of the answers also in my opinion. And then let us explore what David said. So, if you actually examine all of these 3 encounters with Amalek, we are going to discover an amazing pattern, a constancy. Amalek actually attacks the Jewish people every single time when the nation of Israel tried to come closer to the land of Israel. And when the nation of Israel was on its way to build its national life and spiritual life in the land of Israel. This is something extraordinary. And then, yes?
I don't want to interrupt, but where's Amalek now? Why aren't they attacking us now? This is probably the closest we've ever been since Babel. Why haven't they?
The Nazis are all Amalek.
They don't count. They already did.
There's still Nazis in the world.
But we're much closer now, and they're not.
One of the Rabbanim does consider white nationalism to be
Ah. Which hell? I don't know. Come on.
No, Yehuda Cohen.
Oh.
I think any form of
fascism,
of racial nationalism that specifically targets Jews as the enemy could be
Amalek, it's not Nazis.
But I'm not going to count any of that because that's not an
Nuremberg.
attack. Some guy holding up the Beit Knesset is not an attack. An attack is...
Last time I checked, Kristallnacht was pretty much an attack.
Well, we weren't as close then as we are now, so where's the attack now? The Rav is saying that every time we get closer to Israel,
Christian
there's an
missionaries
attack.
are
I'm
Amalek.
But it's a cultural attack as well. They want to destroy our culture. They want to take away, assimilate. They want to destroy our culture.
Christian missionaries are Amalek.
They want to destroy our culture. The West.
So it's a very good question, Yeshua. And I believe that if the Nazis, if they tried to do it, and I'm also going to prove my point from a less known historical incident, which momentarily we're going to see. So we first of all, let's try and approve of what I just said. So we first of all, the first encounter that the nation of Israel had with Amalek was after we left Egypt, the Exodus, and we were on our way to Eretz Israel, as it says in source 8, Zachor et asher asa lecha Amalek baderech b'tzatchem b'Mitzrayim asher karcha baderech. So it says twice baderech. We were on our way, and when the Tanakh repeats a certain word, so it signals to us that we should pay attention to this word. So, Baderech, Am Yisrael was on our way to the land of Israel. So, Amalek tried to prevent us to reach the land of Israel. And you could see in the source, say 10, where it says the exodus from Egypt, the way to Eretz Israel. So there are a couple of verses that the purpose of the exodus was to come to Eretz Israel. That is what Hashem says. Va'ered להצילו מיד מצרים ולהעלותו מן הארץ ההיא אל ארץ טובה ורחבה אל ארץ זבת חלב ודבש. I am going to take the nation of Israel out of Egypt in order to bring them to the land of milk and honey, Eretz Israel. So this is the purpose. And after Kriyat Yam Suf, after the parting of the Red Sea, so Am Yisrael had prophecy that they're going to build the temple. Teviyemo v'titemo behar nachalatecha, Machon Shiftecha, Hashem Mikdash Hashem, Konanu Yadecha. They were talking about the temple. And what Amalek tried to do was to prevent the nation of Israel from reaching the land of Israel and building the temple. This is what Amalek tried to prevent. soon we are going to try and understand why. But first of all, we have to examine the facts. If the exodus from Babylon, the first return to Zion. Now, the point in time that Haman, the descendant of Amalek, attacked the nation of Israel was after Cyrus's declaration. He declared that the nation of Israel is allowed to come back to the land of Israel after the exile of the 70 years, after the destruction of the first temple. The nation of Israel is allowed to come back to the land of Israel and build the temple. So, some of the people of Israel already came to Israel with the Zerubbabel and the temple was in a process of being built. However, this is something very, very interesting, that it is impossible to understand Megillat Esther, the book of Esther, without understanding the importance of the temple and the background of this historical background, because all of Megillat Esther beneath the surface is talking about the temple. Now, I am just going to give you one example. It says in the book of Ezra that the enemies tried to stop the return to Zion. ובמלכות אחשוורוש, וסיים אחשוורוש in מגילת אסתר, בתחילת מלכותו, כתבו שטנה על יושבי יהודה וירושלים. They sent decrees in order to stop the building of the temple. And Rashi explains it on the Megillat Esther, that Aseret b'nei Haman, the 10 sons of Haman, they themselves tried to stop the building of the temple. They were sent to the land of Israel in order to stop the building of the temple. This is what Rashi says. So actually, because that we were so close in building the temple and returning to Zion, Amalek tried to prevent it. Tried to prevent us to come to Eretz Yisrael and build the temple. What?
They had to.
Now, the most interesting is actually the third encounter, the exodus from Europe. It is an F, source 13. The point in history of that the Nazis, the ideological heirs of Amalek, attacked the nation of Israel was right after the Balfour Declaration. Okay? In 1917, that was the Balfour Declaration. After some of the nation of Israel already made Aliyah, okay, in 5 different Aliyot that they came to Israel, which stopped in 1939, and the nation of Israel already built its physical life of Israel, built the Haganah and all kinds of other institutions, and this was actually at the time of that Rabbi Kook and his Talmidim, they already started the spiritual building of the nation of Israel. So this was a critical time in in history, a very critical time, that the nation of Israel, after 2,000 years, is coming back to the land of Israel and is about to build itself spiritually in the land of Israel. Amalek had to stop them. And I've got over here something that most people do not know, and I'm going to tell you. This is an historical story that Adolf Eichmann, he actually had a secret visit to the land of Israel.
His wife.
He came. No. He came himself in 1937. In 1937, so he came to the land of Israel secretly. He came in a boat to Haifa.
Adolf Eichmann?
Yes, he came. He was sent over here in order to find out what the Jews are doing in the land of Israel. That's right. Because at the time, the Nazis were thinking about sending all of the Jews from Germany to the land of Israel. So he was trying to investigate what was going on here. The British had
There was a deal,
only let him.
there was a
What?
deal that was going to be made.
That
with
is
the high
afterwards.
German, right? There was a deal which included all the financial belongings of Jews in Germany to be transferred. It was called the Havara Agreement.
Ah.
Havara Agreement.
Okay, right.
And this preceded the Havara Agreement.
Mhm.
Havara
So-
as in transfer. Transfer.
That's right. So he actually came over here. The British didn't really let him stay here for a long time. He only stayed for one night. But it was enough for him to discover what actually is going on over here. And then he wrote a report to his superiors, and he told them, we have to prevent the establishment of a Jewish state in Israel, because what he saw that the Jews were so close in building a state in Israel, so he said that it has to be stopped. And what?
Is that why they called him Amalek?
This is what I'm trying to show, that the Nazis, they understood that if the state of Israel is actually going to be established, this is going to be a terrible threat. It's going to be a terrible threat, and that is what he told his superiors. He was scared that a Jewish state is actually going to be a terrible threat for Nazi Germany. This is from
Yeah, well, he's right.
the newspaper.
Ma'ariv.
No,
So excuse me.
I'll leave it just a second. In 1961, this is after they kidnapped him and they brought him over here for his trial, and then this report was discovered. They discovered this report. So what he sent his superiors, that one has to stop the establishment of a Jewish state in Israel, and the Nazis tried to conquer the land of Israel. They were stopped by Montgomery in the big battle of El Alamein. But they tried.
With his British general.
Montgomery.
They tried it to come here. So
Was he general?
Yes. Who's a field marshal?
So to summarize, I am just going to summarize at this point. All of the three encounters that the Jewish people had with Amalek, all of these encounters happened exactly at the critical times when the Jewish people were on its way this close to come to the land of Israel and to establish the Jewish state, the temple. So this is exactly what Amalek tried to prevent. So any questions until now? Yes.
What did Adolf Eichmann, him doing this, what did it do to contribute to the 1939 British White Papers that stopped Jews from immigrating to Eretz Israel?
I don't think it was connected at all. The British themselves, they had a anti-Jewish policy, which wasn't connected to the Nazis at all. They had their own policy.
So after the Balfour Declaration...
And they didn't want the Jews to come to the land of Israel. Completely different reason. Okay? More questions? Yes?
I maintain my previous question of why are they not attacking us?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that is a good question.
Can I ask a counter question to that?
Yes.
Are we overdue on an attack? I mean, what's the logic behind that? What's the reason?
They all lost.
Well,
we are as the Jews, we have made a calculation. We expect to be attacked by this entity every once, you know.
What I believe is that the last encounter was during the Holocaust, that they tried to destroy the nation of Israel and to prevent us from coming here. I hope it is the last encounter. Yes?
So, again, I still hold by the belief, I believe shared by Rav Tavia Singer, that the Amalek today exists as the Christian missionaries. They're converting like 2% of America's Jewish population every year to Christianity.
Oh wow! Yeah. I mean,
if that's not genocide, if that's not a silent genocide,
we're talking here about like really warfare, like real warfare, all 3 times.
Yeah.
I mean,
it is very important.
There are plenty of countries that wish and openly declare the destruction of the state of Israel, and they include Syria, Iraq, Iran, obviously, Yemen. So it's not. I mean, if we're talking about literal annihilation, it hasn't been done yet. But the Jews have learned a lesson that when people want to call for our death, we don't take it as political propaganda. We take it literally.
So I think that some of the questions and the remarks that you had just said are going to be answered when we understand the definition of Amalek, and also why does Amalek feel threatened when the nation of Israel are so close to the land of Israel and building the temple. What is so threatening that the the nation of Israel unites with its country and builds the temple. Why is that such a danger?
Historically, Jews are better off when united.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all the problems that we've had have always been when we were separated and spread out. I mean, the Jews in, say, for Russia, in only 80 years ago, somewhat 80 years ago, they were living under persecution, but were allowed to settle in the land.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yes.
And even then, the land didn't belong to them because of communism.
Mm-hmm. So, definitely, I agree with you that the unity of the nation of Israel is a very powerful. However, we need to understand what is the thread in building the temple. Yes?
In the case of Soviet Russia,
Mm-hmm.
there was a plan right before the fall of the Iron Curtain to create a Jewish autonomous region.
That's right.
These plans were drawn in the far, far east near Vladivostok,
Right.
where the land is desolate, it's unsustainable, meaning they, unlike the Nazis, they didn't want to export the Jews. They were fine with them there. They wanted their brains and their skills and their talents. But all the rest of the Jews, people who didn't belong to the intelligentsia, they wished them to stay in Russia. No problem. We'll keep you far away from the big cities and create your Jewish place. It was called Birobidzhan. It ultimately failed.
That's right.
But
so it's a good point. It's a good point, which leads me to said a very important distinction. Not every anti-Semite is an Amalek. Not everyone who attacks the Jewish people or tries to convert them or try to do other things are automatically put in the category of Amalek, because what Amalek is something unique.
Well,
as we saw, yes?
Amalek, from what I gather, based on everything, isn't something that's just Jew-hating. It's like you can't call the Russians Amalek. They're not.
That's right.
That's what I was saying.
Their ideals are completely different. What the Malik wants to do isn't, persecution of Jews. It's the total annihilation.
Yeah. It's to delete a race off of the world.
Like we're supposed to.
So recently, there's a big scandal around the U.S. A primetime group talk show. It's called The View.
Yeah,
a woman named Whoopi Goldberg. She made some very open remarks, and where she states that according to her, the Holocaust wasn't about race, but it was about inhumanity.
Literally opened the first page of Maus.
And look at Mein Kampf, okay, written by Hitler. Mein Kampf literally calls for the destruction of the Jewish race.
Yeah.
Yes.
What was the between the British General Montgomery and the Nazis when they tried to conquer Eretz Israel? What was the name of the battle?
El Alamein.
It's not because they're like
El Alamein.
Yes.
El Alamein.
El Alamein. Okay. So let's ask the question again. Why is Amalek, why does he feel so threatened by building the temple in the land of Israel? So the answer is that you could see in section G, page 4, source 14. So the temple actually represents a completely new world. As the prophecy of Isaiah, והיה באחרית הימים, נכון יהיה הר בית השם בראש ההרים, ונישא מגבעות, ונהרו אליו כל הגויים, והלכו עמים רבים ואמרו, לכו ונעלה אל הר השם, אל בית אלוקי יעקב, ויורנו מדרכיו ונמחה באורחותיו, כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר השם מירושלים. and then afterwards, after the prophet describes the temple in Jerusalem at the end of the days, there is the prophecy on warfare. The famous prophecy that is inscribed today on the walls of the UN in New York, ושפט בין הגויים והוכיח לעמים רבים וכיתתו חרבותם לעתים וחניתותיהם למזמרות. They're going to turn their swords into spades, right? ולא יישא גוי על גוי חרב ולא ילמדו עוד מלחמה, and they are not going to study warfare any longer. This is the famous prophecy that everyone knows. So the temple actually represents a new era of morality. That there isn't going to be any more warfare. All of the swords, all of the weapons of destruction are going to be turned into
shovels,
tools of peace. Okay? And this is something that Amalek opposes to, because that Amalek,
they want war all the time.
That's right, because what Amalek believes that might is right. That it is perfectly okay to attack innocent, to kill children and women, like they did when we went out of Egypt. They attacked the weak, and all throughout history, all of the encounters of Amalek, we could see a regime, tyrants that are based on the ideology that might is right, that they could use.
So would you say Genghis Khan was Amalek?
No, but
we have mentioned last class of a.
But he did belong to the. But he did belong to the ancient ideology that might is right.
What was the name of the king or
As I said,
state general, Roman Greek? He
right?
was the progenitor of might is right. He pursued outcomes through warfare. We mentioned him last time.
Nietzsche.
No. Before the first account of anti-Semitism.
The first
Nimrod,
right? So, if you would turn the page, please, to page
is
5.
Nimrod from Agag?
No.
So what is he?
Nimrod was Nimrod. He was a person who believed in the ideology that might is right, that one could use a cruelty, that one could do the most terrible things, and that is fine. So, if the nation of Israel actually, when the nation of Israel, this great prophecy of Isaiah, that the whole world is going to be filled with peace, and that warfare is going to be behind us, and that the weapons of destruction are going to turn into tools of peace. This vision can only be materialized when the nation of Israel comes to its historical land, when we come to the land of Israel and we build ourselves spiritually and live according to the Torah. And this is why Amalek tried all throughout history to stop the return to Zion. In all of the incidents that we saw, all of the 3 encounters. We were about to return to Zion, and Amalek tried to stop us, because that he did not want this great vision to be materialized. Because that Amalek feels threatened that from the morality and the justice of the ideals of a compassion and a loving kindness, that these ideals are going to be materialized. If the Rabbi Hirsch, the great commentator on the Torah, who lived in Germany about 150 years ago. So he says, you could see it in source 15. Amalek bא לרמוס את נושא דבר הרוח, המוסר, השלום וכבוד האדם. מיד עם עלייתו הראשונה על במת ההיסטוריה של העמים. So, what he says in a translation into English is that Amalek tried to destroy the nation of Israel, who teaches of the world morality, peace, human rights. This is what Amalek tried to destroy. And this is why in the Talmud, in the tractate of the Sanhedrin, so it says that the 3 mitzvahs that we have to do right when we come to the land of Israel. First of all, to nominate a king. Secondly, does anyone know what we have to do?
We didn't do that until 300 years after we got here, and we had to ask for it. The mitzvah did not become a mitzvah until we said, let's have a king.
Mm-hmm.
So,
that is a good question, but it's a completely different topic, because when it deals with a question, what is the proper a government that the nation of Israel should have? Should it be a democracy, or should it be a monarchy? What should the ideal government of a nation of Israel? But that is a completely different topic. It's a very, very important topic and very interesting topic, but with your permission, we aren't going to deal with it. But the second mitzvah that we have after nominating a king, it is to stop Amalek. And then only after that can we build the temple. So the stopping Amalek is a vital step in building the temple. So Rabbi Kook actually says in the book of Orot, you could see it in the source 18, that this idea that the what Amalek is trying to do, it is to fight against the morality of the nation of Israel, fighting against the ideals of loving kindness, human rights, the belief that man is created in God's image. This is a belief that is foreign to Amalek. Amalek doesn't believe in that. And this is actually the secret to why Amalek is trying to destroy the nation of Israel, because with Amalek cannot cannot accept the fact that the world is going to be
So it's self-preservation.
filled with peace. Yes? What?
It's self-preservation. They have their mentality on how the world should be, and they're just trying to defend what they think is right. Which explains why they don't go attack the Roman Empire. They don't go attack the Greek Empire or the Persians or the Syrians. They attack the Jews because they want to change their moral system.
Mm-hmm. And absolutely. And as I explained the last lesson, and I'm just going to summarize it very quickly, that whoever wants to understand the ideology behind the thinking of Amalek should read the works of Friedrich Nietzsche.
Nietzsche, the German
philosopher, that's right, because but he explains exactly what you said, Ashua.
father of nihilism.
He explains that the morality that the Jewish people taught it to the world through the Torah is completely against the law of the jungle, because but he believed that might is right, that in nature
Right, I remember discussing this last week.
the survival of the fittest, whoever is strong rules and survives, and that Nietzsche believed that the Jewish people actually influenced the world, changed the morality of the world into introducing a completely new set of values of peace and compassion and loving kindness and all kinds of completely foreign values to the nature of mankind according to Nietzsche. So, as I mentioned also last lesson, that the Nazis based their ideology on the works of Friedrich Nietzsche. So in order to understand the ideology of Amalek, it is necessarily to understand the works of Nietzsche, because he explains it in the best way possible.
He explains it, and then what's the natural conclusion? If you want to combat that, kill everyone. The only conclusion.
Education. That's the conclusion.
So the conclusions. So how do we fight this ideology? How do we deal with Amalek? So if you could see in a source 19 where it says H, the future. This is a picture of a Rav Kook, and then he explained like this. He said that there is going to be a time, there is going to be a day that the world is going to understand that morality and justice is the right way, and the humanity is going to desire peace. But until this day comes, so we have to fight against evil in the world. We have to fight against cruelty. This is something that we have to do in in order to stop those who believe that might is right. And as I mentioned the last shiur, this is what Abraham did in order to fight Nimrod, because for the Nimrod murdered innocent people and the civilians, and he destroyed the towns and it took captives. And then Avraham Avinu understood that he cannot just sit down and be silent when terrible things are happening. So he said that he has to do something. He has to stop this this evil going wild in the world. So he took his men and he fought. He fought Nimrod, and he was able to rescue the captives and to bring freedom. So until the final redemption comes, we have to do what we can in order to stop the violence in the world, in order to stop the ideology who believes that might is right and that it's okay to be cruel. Instead of that, we have to introduce it to the world the values of peace, of loving kindness, of freedom, of that every man is created in the image of God. So, any questions any questions about or insights, any comments? So that's it. So good evening, everyone.
Thank you very much.
And thank you.
Very much, Rob. Thank you.
Sure.
Wow. It's not the most